it's my final kind of appeal to the American people. And I wasn't, this segment was a lot, became a lot longer than I was intending it for, because I actually got into an argument with some random anon on Twitter regarding some politics and issues like that. So I wanted to share kind of my argument with the person and get your thoughts, Tristan. I was hoping that Dom would be here too, but I guess just your thoughts on, whether I was being unreasonable or whether he was being unreasonable. So we'll go through that a little bit later. But first, let me go through kind of the top issues that are facing Americans that are kind of self-reported as the most important issues. So you can see inflation and increasing costs, free speech, healthcare, abortion, crime. I'm not going to go through all of them, but those are the top 5. So just, we're not going to go through every single one because it'll take too long, but just keep this chart in mind as we go through kind of the rest of the story. So the next part is this account called Polling USA, which, by the way, this account is very left-leaning, right? Like, don't let this name fool you. But this, whoever runs this Polling USA account, he's very clearly pro Kamala Harris. So keep that in mind, right? And he reshared this news from Axios, that this new report that just came out that says that the U.S. economy grew at 2.8%. In the third quarter. So it was, I think, above expectations, and people weren't expecting this GDP growth number to be so high. So he's like, hey, like, this is good news for Harris. Look how well the Biden administration's doing. And Harris is a part of the Biden administration, obviously. So how can you spin this, right? Like, why is this bad for Harris is kind of what he's getting at. So I responded to this tweet, and I was like, it's bad for Harris if the official numbers are not reflecting what people are feeling on the ground. There's nothing that gets people more mad and want to vote against the incumbent party if they're financially struggling, and then getting a piece of paper shoved in their face saying, hey, everything is okay. So somebody, this person named FB Duke, decided to impart his opinions. So he replied to my comment, and he was like, so should the government tell them that they're struggling due to predatory car loans that they should have never signed? And I was like, why is he bringing up this car loan thing, right? So I responded, it's belittling that you would think that all people financially struggling are struggling because they signed a predatory car loan. There are a lot of people working 2 jobs that are trying to get by but can't. And he tried to defend himself, and he says, I don't think that all people struggling are dealing with predatory car loans, but it's a lot. Okay, maybe I would ask him for the source on that, but whatever. And he says the median person is better off than they were 4 or 8 years ago. If someone thinks that they're near the median, they're not better off, or almost always in shitty financial decisions. It's almost always shitty financial decisions. The poverty rate is down, unemployment is down. People struggle at the bottom, but the bottom is still shrinking, and the middle class is still growing. Somehow the soft landing worked at avoiding a recession. Not much else a government can do. So he's basically saying, hey, look, the government's done a great job. We have all these numbers that are coming in great. Unemployment is down. The poverty rate is down. GDP growth is going, right? And I replied, hey, look, if you actually list the issues that Americans are most concerned about in this election, and that's why I presented the chart first, because I wanted you to keep this chart in mind. If you actually ask Americans what's the most concerning issue on this election, the economy is top of the list, or at least always top 3. Why would they be concerned about the economy in general if the general consensus is that the economy is doing great? And I would argue that things like healthcare. So healthcare is not universally provided in America. People have to pay for healthcare. So maybe you can put that under financial related matters as well, right? So if you ask Americans, 68% of them, so over two thirds, say that inflation or increasing costs is the most concerning issue. And then he replies to something that is just absolutely baffling to me. And I'm not sure if you would agree with me, Tristan, on this, but he replied, because they're misinformed and wrong. Half of Americans are below average intelligence. It's pretty easy to convince them that the economy is bad because people are gullible and bad at comparing state of affairs. People are famously bad at judging inflation in particular, and you can't fake inflation stats. Facts don't care about feelings. So I replied, your argument is extremely condescending to the American people. Well, first of all, I didn't say this in the tweet, but he basically called Americans dumb, right? That's the first thing, right? So let's not forget that. But I said your argument is extremely condescending to the American people because you're essentially saying if you think you're poor, then you're misinformed and wrong. And my opinion is this is why the Dems will lose, because they're plugged into the matrix and they're refusing to unplug because they all live in this like fantasy land. And well, not all of them, but you know, a lot of Dems live in this fantasy land where they just think that, you know, a piece of paper that says that the numbers are doing well, then you should just believe the numbers, right? So I think I said this is why the Dems will lose, because when people complain that they're suffering, the response from the Dems is shut up, you're wrong. And he tried to defend himself. It's like, no, if you think people are on average worse off than 4 or 8 years ago, then you're wrong. A shrinking percentage of people will be right that they're poor. You're still making bad financial decisions by being a crypto bro. So I don't know where he brought the crypto bro. I guess he went on my profile and said I was pro, where I said I was pro BTC. And like, that's how you know you're losing an argument, when you're just pulling something randomly out of thin air that doesn't have anything to do with the argument at hand and criticizing me for it. So he says you are still making bad financial decisions for being a crypto bro. I'm sorry that facts offend you. So I said, there's no arguing with someone who tells poor people that you're poor because you're misinformed. And if you were better informed, then you wouldn't be poor. We can only hope that people like you who think this way get your voices drowned out at the ballot box on November 5th. So that's the whole argument. And I think he like said something insulting later on, but I just ignored him. And yeah, basically that's kind of the whole conversation. So I want to pass this question off to you, Tristan. Who do you think was the more reasonable one? And yeah, what's your opinion on this whole like on this whole argument, or anything I talked about in general for this story?
I gotta say, he's really trying to blame the victims, isn't he? Like, he is desperately trying to pin the poor people. If you're poor, it's your fault you're poor. That's very much what the gist is from this, you know. You're struggling because you took on a predatory car loan. Oh, that's your fault. You shouldn't have taken on a predatory car loan. Okay, maybe you should have taken on a predatory car loan. Why is a predatory car loan something that's allowed in the first place? Let's, you know, we can argue about that piece. Or alternatively, why are cars such a necessity in America that you have to have a car, therefore you have to take out a predatory car loan because you're poor and you have no money? So like that whole argument is that whole piece is just completely it's completely brain dead. I'm sorry. I can't think of a nicer way to put it. It's just like it's very like you are the problem. You've created your own problem. Everyone would be perfectly fine if everyone was, you know, and well, going into this, he calls them all stupid. You know, if everyone was smart like me, they'd make good financial decisions, bro, and not have predatory car loans. Like, not everyone's had as much education as this guy may have had. Not everyone has had the financial education. Financial education is not something that's given in school. So, and if they're getting their financial education from their parents, which is where most people get it, and the financial education is, you know, lacking because their parents' financial education was lacking because, again, no one was taught it in school, then they're going to make mistakes just the same way that their parents made mistakes. There are hundreds of people, like thousands of millions of people even, who don't know how credit cards work, for example. is that the fault of the people who have the credit cards and don't know how they work and then use them, incredibly irresponsibly? Yes, but also it is the fault of the system for not teaching them how to use the credit cards in the first place. So he's just really hammering on the logic that the poor people deserve their fate because they are putting themselves in a position where they should be in that scenario. It's their fault. They've made the decisions. If I take out a loan for my car and I'm paying 11% interest and or 20% interest, but I need a car to get to work because I live in any city in America that requires a car, which is basically all of them, then, I've made a great mistake. And, no one told me that I shouldn't have done that, but now I'm stuck with this car that I've got to pay for. Like, if you watch the Caleb Hammer videos, like, I don't know, I'm sure you've watched several of them, but like most of these people, they don't have any training. They don't have anyone that taught them how to make good decisions. And then once they, have someone who can tell them how to make better financial decisions and give them some education, a lot more of them are able to get their shit together and stop making poor financial decisions. So, and anyway, like it's the whole argument that it's their fault is just really, I think you said it best with the condescending. Like, it's very, like, it's talking down on these people. Like, it's like someone who like views a homeless person on the side of the street and is like, you did that. That was your fault. That homeless person, that is their fault. And, blaming the victim of these scenario, like in this scenario, that's not how you're going to make society better. That's not how you're going to help that person get back on their feet. That's not how you're going to have someone who is having trouble become a more contributing member of society. There were millions of very smart, poor people who have only the amount of time to think about how they're going to put food on the table tomorrow and pay their rent at the end of the month. They don't have time to better their situation because they've made a mistake earlier on that they were not taught to foresee. And now they are stuck with the consequences of their actions that they would have had no way of knowing that there were consequences to their actions because they were never taught to do that. And you make a mistake. Like, look at all the people who have student loans. You go to school, you get a degree that is not very employable, and now you've got $100,000 of student loans. You were told that you were going to be getting a good paying job after the end of you getting that degree, and now you can't get it. You can't afford to get a new job. You've got a huge amount of debt. You're basically drowning. And it's just like it's so condescending to just blame people for their like the state that they're in, because again, it's not going to ever fix the problem, and it's also not going to convince these people who are in this scenario that they are better off. Because if you're in that scenario where you've made the mistakes in the past, you cannot go back and change your mistakes. You can't fix them. We don't have time machines. Time travel's not been invented yet. I can't go back in time and be like, oh, I shouldn't have taken out that 20% interest loan that I didn't know would be costing me, hundreds of thousands of dollars because I, wasn't taught about interest in school. So I didn't understand that I was going to be paying this annually and it was going to be a whole problem. Like, I can't go back in time and fix that. So because of that, now I have this huge debt that I can't afford to get rid of because I need the car for work, but I can't afford to keep because it's killing me. Like, and then he's going, sorry. And then inflation kicks in, bumps up the price of like their rent or their cost of living, like their food and groceries, whatever. And now they're sitting there going, well, what do I do? Because if you're in that little that range where you don't have that extra money being put aside every month. You're basically paycheck to paycheck. You don't have the wiggle room to fix your problems very easily. You really need someone to help you. And that, this is kind of why I like Caleb Hammer's show, is because he helps people, even though sometimes they've done a lot of stuff to put themselves in the situation they are, but a lot of the time, again, it's education. It's all about the education. So the guy is just really just like, these people are, he's just so hard on victim blaming. He's offering no way to help these people, and then he's acting like the economy is good, and that people shouldn't feel bad that they don't feel like they should be doing better than they are, because the economy is doing well, but also they aren't, because they've got tremendous amounts of debt because of the way the system has encouraged them to take on copious amounts of debt, and now they're drowning in debt. It's just like, it's I came from a middle class family or higher, where they had money. They could cover, the family had savings. The family probably had a house, probably had some money, and they managed their finances well because their parents were likely middle class also and managed their finances well. Or at some point, someone managed to, increase their standard of living by getting some degree of additional education or something to bring them into the middle class at some point. And then they figured out how to do their finances. Like, at some point along the line, their parents themselves, someone got financial education in there. And like, why are you blaming the people who haven't yet had that for not having yet had that? And it's just like, it's very condescending. It's not going to be convincing for anyone. Like, no one is going to roll out of bed and be like, wow, I have been convinced that the economy is doing good, and now I should, do what I got to do. Now I can afford to buy stuff because the economy's good now. So,
I mean, I don't even think this person is that financially educated. If they went to my profile, saw the words BTC, and was like, oh, you're a scammer, or your opinion's invalid because you believe in Bitcoin. So like, they're plugged into the matrix. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just like they're part of the system, and they're so disconnected from the reality of what's actually going on that they're just completely blinded, and they live in their own world, and they live in their own echo chamber, and they only hear opinions that they agree with, and then they like call people names when they just present different opinions, like, hey, like, what if the things aren't as great as what they seem on paper, right? And it's like, oh yeah, no, you're not poor, you're just misinformed. If you think if you went out and grabbed like better sourced information, then you're not poor anymore. It's like, no, that's not how like anything works, right?
Or you're stupid, or you're stupid. He literally was just like, half the population is below average intelligence, therefore, it's their fault that they're not doing well. Like, I can't, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, I mean, so to clarify something, I'm not trying to imply that all Democrats think this way, right? I know that there are a lot of well-intentioned, good-meaning Democrats who, just so happens to be voting for Kamala Harris because that's just who the Democrats picked as their nominee, and they just want to support their party and whatever. I get it, right? But I'm saying that there is a very significant group of Democrats who think this way. And these are what I like to call the ivory tower liberals, right? And we have the same problem in Canada too, for that matter, right? Where you have all these people that are let's just call them, right, alt left, extreme left leaning, radical left leaning, whatever you want to call them, but they're on the left side and they're on the progressive side, and they want to push this ideology of let's like unite and everyone get together, joy, all this stuff, all this like beautiful imagery. But if you actually try to dig deep into it, they're living in their ivory towers. They've never had to worry about putting food on the table, and they just automatically think that all poor people are poor because they make bad financial decisions because they're dumb. Like, this is literally what he said, right? And I just think that there's no other word to describe it than belittling, condescending. And I think for that, and there's a lot of these people in the Democratic Party. That's my issue, right? Again, I'm not implying that all Democratic supporters are like this, but there is a very significant chunk of Democratic supporters that are like this. And take a wild guess on who he's voting for in the election if he's American, right? So yeah, I just think that based on all of this, I'll stand by what I said. This is why the Dems will lose, and this is why they deserve to lose. And if they don't lose on November 5th, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. I will skip mad and go straight to disappointed. Like, this is completely unacceptable. And if you elect Kamala Harris, I think all of these issues with the white ivory tower liberals and all this stuff, this is just going to get worse because she's part of the system, right? And it's just she's not going to be able to address any of these issues properly, in my opinion, because she has not put out any policy that is remotely specific or enticing. But yeah, Tristan, you were going to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the inflation thing that he mentioned. You can't fake inflation stats. I just wanted to hit on that one because the best way to check inflation is to walk into the store, buy something that you would have bought a year ago that you know the price of, and then you will get an actual reflection of what inflation was on that item in the time frame. So if I walk into the store and the can of soup that I used to buy for 99 cents is now $1.40, guess what? That is a 40% inflation between that time frame. I feel like I don't need to, like, I understand that we have like the stats that are like, ooh, 2% or 8%. What it really comes down to is not that time frame inflation. It is the dollar amount inflation that the people are seeing in their actual bill. And their actual bill inflation is significantly higher than any time I go 8% inflation in this basket of goods that I made up, that I can change things in all the time. Like, yes, I understand that it's more complicated than that for the CPI, etc. But like, again, it's also typically in a shorter time frame. When you just look at it from like 2019 to now, you are literally looking at like 40% plus inflation. And my can of soup example is very definitive, because I can walk into No Frills, buy the exact same can of soup that I bought back in 2019, and I am now receiving either the same soup for way more money, 40%-ish, or I am receiving less soup for the same amount of money. And so it's like, don't tell me that you can't, that people can't judge inflation. I'm pretty sure just about anyone can walk into a grocery store and be like, I used to pay less for these eggs than I did before. I used to be able to buy more eggs on my paycheck than I did before. Maybe inflation has something to do with that. Like, it's just so condescending.
Well, it's gaslighting, right? It's gaslighting at its finest. And this is the same kind of stuff that happens in Canada too with the Trudeau liberals, right? Where you tell them that it in this case is America for the Dems, but whatever you tell the government, it's like, hey, inflation is really bad and my wages have not gone up enough to keep up, and I'm financially struggling. And then they shove a report in your face like, well, GDP grew more than expected. It's like, well, I don't care about GDP growing more than expected. Like, I care about putting food on the table, and inflation's gone up. It's like, no, well, actually, you see, inflation was 8%. Now it's 2.5%. It's actually gone down. It's like, well, you know how inflation works, right? It's compounding, right? Meaning that it was 8% year over year compared to the previous year, but now it's 2.5%, which means that it's actually 2.5% higher on top of when it already went up 8% the year before. So technically, like, it never went, like, the prices themselves never went down, and the number is still going up. It's just going up at a slower rate. But like, you try to explain this, and they just gaslight you, right? They're like, I have this piece of paper that proves that you are not struggling, and whatever you say, and you say, but I am struggling, and it's like, no, you're not. Like, what can you say to that? Like, this is what I said in the end, right? There's literally no arguing with these people. You cannot argue with these people because they literally think you're poor because you're misinformed, because you're victim to misinformation. Like, what amount of gaslighting could throw somebody into this position? I like, it's just, I can't even fathom to think about how logic works in this person's brain. And unfortunately, you're going to be seeing, I'm seeing a lot of this, pretty much 100% of what I'm seeing of similar situations and similar people who are making these kind of crazy arguments that are completely illogical are from the Democratic side. I'm just saying, right? Like, I know I'm biased, and I know you're going to say that that was a super biased thing for me to say, but I'm just literally reporting on what I'm seeing. And there's only one side that's trying to gaslight, and it's the side that, in my opinion, is struggling, because there's no way that Kamala Harris can defend her record on the economy under the Biden administration, because they've made a mess of the economy. And this is not even to start talking about the border and all that stuff, but I guess that kind of stuff's been hammered to hell, so we won't talk about it today. But yeah, all of this is going to get exponentially worse if Kamala Harris is elected to be president. And this is why I put this story last, as part of my final appeal to the American people. And it's like, listen, I know a lot of people find Trump absolutely unpalatable, but you cannot just select a president just based on the fact that she's not Trump, because that's a bad reason. There are third parties to vote for if you really hate Trump and you can't fathom yourself voting for him ever, no matter what. But I'm just saying, right? Like, if you vote for these, let's say, just objectively, I think, bad candidate, which Kamala is, I think that's the consensus of the night, then you can't expect good outcomes. And that's my final appeal to the American people, is that above us, or before us, are two paths. And there's one path that will, you already know kind of what to expect, because Trump has been president for 4 years. A lot of people forget that, but he was already the president, and the planet didn't blow up. And in fact, it was one of the most peaceful times in terms of geopolitics, geopolitical conflicts, right? Like, there were no new wars that started. And in fact, the war against ISIS ended under Trump. Above us are two paths, right? So we already have the monster that we know, which is Trump. And then we have all these, like, bad signs and all these, like, stuff that's happening. And Kamala has stated, like, she has not stated whether she's going to be, how different she's going to be than Biden. So my assumption is that her administration is just going to be like a worse version of Biden at this point. So listen, like, those are the two paths, right? And on November 5th, America needs to make a decision. And I think I've made my opinions on this pretty clear. So that's my closing argument. And I hope that America makes the right choice, because if you make the wrong choice, things could get really bad. People think that America is such a fantastic, great ship in the sea. It's like the Titanic, right? Well, guess what happened to the Titanic? It sank. If you don't have a good captain, if you don't have a good person at the helm, the ship can sink. And I don't want to sound alarmist, but even for a country like America, if you're not careful, the ship could sink. And I'm just, my last pitch is just reflect upon this decision very, very deeply and think about both sides of the argument, right? Keep an open mind to both sides of the argument. And if at the end you decide one way or the other, even if it's not the side that I'm advocating for, that's fine. But it just I'm begging you guys not to just to think about this issue deeply and to actually keep an open mind and reflect upon the issues at hand. So that's my final pitch, and I'll leave it at that. And let me pass it off to Tristan. If you want to make your final kind of appeal to America, your famous last words, say now or forever hold your peace, basically. So take it away.
Yeah, I think people should just vote with based on their assessment of everything going on in the world, in the country. Just take everything into account, make the determination on who would be the one that you want to be your president going forward. I'm not going to specify or go too hard on like who that is. I don't really care. At the end of the day, I don't really have a horse in this race. I think things will. I may be less alarmist than Andy. I think that things will work out pretty acceptably either way. But I do think that people should very much consider where they are, who they're more aligned with, what they want to have as their priority, as their priorities, and what's most important to them, and just go and vote based on that. And I do, and I think that it's important to keep in mind that I don't think that there is. I think that there are issues with both of these options. I don't think that we're in a scenario where there is a clear option that is significantly better than the other. So I think it's very much a pick your poison, determine what is more important to you and what is less important to you, and make that stance, commit to the bit, and throw that ballot. And at the end of the day, I think we'll find out who has been more convincing, who is going to be more convincing, compelling, and going to be leading the country pretty soon. So I mean, I think at the end of the day, from my perspective, I don't really see a scenario where I am significantly worse off depending on who gets elected, assuming that, of course, there's no nuclear war. I'd prefer to not have that, so just something to keep in mind. But at the end of the day, I think for me, I don't really have a horse in the race, so just don't get me nuked, and everything will be fine. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think that pretty much covers it. Go vote, be happy, and everyone be mature when the election ends. And if the person you don't want gets picked, grow up and accept it, and that I think does go for the political leaders as well. If you don't win, accept that you didn't win. And I think we both know who I'm talking about on that one, but I think both sides do this to a certain extent. But I think one's been a little bit more vocal on that one. So I would just like it to be a good, clean election, just like the kids say, and everything will be everything will come out and be all right in the end.